Izzy. Welcome to the podcast. I would love to kick off by asking you, are you well actually?
That's a really big question to begin with. Hi, Al.
Hi.
Hi. I love this question because it's a really reflective question, and it gives us a lot of scope to go a little bit deeper, doesn't it? So I am well. I feel really well, and I think my definition of well has changed somewhat over the years, could we say. I think wellness is a really good question to ask, as opposed to sort of healthy, I guess.
Yeah.
Because for me, it means that we're actually looking at the whole person. We're looking at what it means to be well in an individual way. And I suppose for me, that is more than health. That is an emotional, that's a spiritual as well as a physical thing. And, you know, I suppose even if I weren't, and I don't ever feel like I'm in my optimum health 100%, you know, and I don't think anyone does. And in the fields that you and I both work in, we're rarely going to meet people who are 100% healthy in their view, in their eyes. But you can still be at peace. You can still find an inner peace, even though you are not where you want to be in your physical health. And I suppose that's what I feel when you ask me if I'm well. It's more, am I at peace with myself? And I would say, yes, I am.
Wonderful. I love that. That's such a great way to look at it, rather than to kind of always be chasing after one aspect of it that doesn't feel quite right.
Yeah, completely. And it's a really subjective and personal thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wellness and well-being. I think everyone will have their own definition of what it is to be well. But for me, I feel that it's just more than one thing. It's a total, and it's even beyond holistic or whole health. It's just the complete picture of being at peace with your place in the world, with your place, you know, kind of where you are, the person that you are as well, kind of making peace with the parts of yourself you don't particularly like, or that you feel still need work on. Yeah, it's a form of acceptance, and perhaps just being really honest that you are meeting yourself in your full expression. What do you think about that?
I think that's wonderful. And I think that's so, I think so much, I agree. I think so much of the way wellness and health, or health, let's say health is portrayed as this thing you've got to achieve, and maybe leaving people feeling like they're always falling a bit short. So I think that acceptance along the way and enjoying the process well is so important. Did you always have this view of sort of acceptance of being at peace? How did you reach this point?
Well, I suppose I've always been really fortunate to feel healthy. I've never had like a big chronic health challenge. I really, really admire and respect people who grow from that place. And in coaching, there are many, many people who have moved on from that place and then go on to empower others. And I don't have that story myself. I had a very loving, outdoorsy childhood. My parents would shop in health food stores, and you know, everything was home cooked. And my mother was an early yogi, and she had a very strong, she had quite a spiritual side to her, and she loved astrology. She was always doing our our charts, and everyone in our family, she would know all of their natal charts.
Mm.
So that was quite a big influence for me. And we traveled a lot. I lived in Paris for my teenage years, which was quite an exciting time. My mother's French.
Mm.
So we had quite an international travel-y sort of upbringing. And then I suppose the transitional time for me was really in my late teens and early 20s when I suppose I stepped into my rebellion a little bit.
Mm.
And having been really healthy up until then, kind of discovered junk food and drinking, and late nights, and kind of the more toxic side of socializing. So, experimenting with substances and all night partying and just not loving my body really. Um, yeah, so those sort of years went on into my university years and my early 20s. And where are we? This would have been around the millennium, so the early 2000s. And like energetically, it was a time of it was a real party era. It was a real party era. Clubbing was massive.
Mm.
Rents in London were still quite affordable, and income was pretty good. So actually, it was a quite a hedonistic time.
Yeah.
It was like a real yeah, it was that sort of 1830s Ibiza parties, and lots and lots of partying, and a real sense of being invincible, which I think is that wonderful thing that young people have, you
Mhm.
know. Um, but I was also really aware, and probably because I had this foundational, you know, place from where I'd been raised with values of guarding your health, and was offered the tools of what a nutritious diet looked like, and how important it was to gather with your family and cook together and just enjoy those simple things, that you get from being with the people that you love. And that was kind of my baseline.
Yeah.
And that was like a comfort for me that I kept returning to and reminding myself, well, there's Izzy who's 22 and partying every night in London, and there's Izzy who can come home and just be nourished and get resourced again, because this is my foundation. And yoga was the big thing for me. I think that was really the turning points where, um up until like my early 20s, I'd practiced yoga for physical benefit. So it was like my way of keeping fit, my way of wanting to get bendy, having a kind of yogi body. Um, and it's really interesting because like the yoga that my mum used to practice in the early 80s was like, it was very hatha, it was very grounded.
Mm.
Um, Everyone had long hair. There were lots of men in the classes.
Mhm.
There was a lot of, I feel like there was a lot of body hair in that era.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. I
Yeah,
know
do you know what I mean? Like all
exactly.
of her yoga books were like black and white pages of just these fabulous people with lots of hair. There was a real vibe, a real kind of 70s vibe. And, what they would wear was vests and shorts. There's no lycra, there's no funky. It was just a really different, true, authentic yoga vibe.
Mm.
And I was quite conscious of this change in what was happening in the yoga world. Even then, I mean, this is like 25 years ago.
Mm.
But I really gravitated towards yoga because I found it was really beneficial, like in my health, in my physical body. But as I kind of went through my 20s and began to tune in with those feelings of exhaustion and that niggle that I wasn't really honoring my body the best way I possibly could, I came back to yoga. And what yoga did was it took me beyond the place of, I'm doing this because it's helping me in my physical body, which undoubtedly it is.
Mm.
But it would just remind me of who I was.
Yeah.
It just brought me back to myself. And like people talk about how it's it's yes, it's a very spiritual practice. These conversations about gaining inner peace, okay, but I think it was more than that for me. It was just meeting myself in who I was in that moment.
Mhm.
And it just gave me that sense of holding up a mirror almost, and being kind of being true to myself and saying, well, this is who you are right now. This is what you're doing to yourself.
Mm.
This is what you look like. This is your energy. You need to see this. I'm not judging you for it, but I want you to see yourself, and I want you to see what you're doing in your life. And I want you to question whether that's the right thing for you. And yoga did that for me. It would frequently bring me back to this place of truth.
Yeah.
Um, and the more I did that, the more I came back to this place of truth, the more I felt this kind of duality between my actual life and the life where I felt I was going.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, a lot changed for me. I quit my corporate job. I retrained at that point in holistic nutrition, and then I took lots of other beautiful therapeutics along the way, and I grew a little business in wellness.
Mm.
So I suppose although there wasn't anything that was trying to address, it was just a really cool coming back to my authentic self, and
Mhm.
actually having the courage to question whether this actually what you want to do? Is this what you want to be doing? Are you going to be doing this for the next 20 years? Are these the people you want in your life in 20 years' time?
Mm.
Um, and then moving on from there, from that place.
I relate to that so much. I had such a
You.
similar experience. Yeah. And it does, you're so right about the mirror. And it just gets you after a while, even if you don't want it to. The yoga kind of it just gets you. Did you teach yoga as well, don't you? As well as
Yeah, I stopped recently because my coaching was just getting really, really intense.
mm,
But I taught, so yeah, I actually so yoga was very consistent throughout my whole life, and I spent a decade of my life having my children.
mm,
Um, and yoga was something I just kept dipping in and out of, coming back to again, just reminding myself when life got overwhelming, just coming back to me.
mm,
I did that in studio. At home, I find it a little bit, particularly now because I have a very, very busy household. We're a home educating family, and I've got 4 children. So there's constantly people in and out, in
yeah.
and out. So I do have to go and find those places now, and I'm quite choosy about where I go. But whenever I do find it, it's just utter bliss. It's I get to that place of discomfort, and then I meet it, and then I'm in this blissful state again. But when I turned 40, I decided to train as a yoga teacher, and I offered myself a very immersive year of yoga. And well, yeah. So I probably taught for about 4 years, quite regularly in studio. Yeah, yeah, but now not so much, unfortunately. I kind of keep yoga to myself now, and perhaps one day I'll go back and offer it out again. But yeah.
I bet it informs your coaching though, not necessarily on the physical plane, but on the kind of that holding the mirror up, like compassionately holding the
Mm.
mirror up to your clients,
Mm.
and hold the mirror to themselves.
Yeah, it's really useful to have that awareness and to be able to support my clients with some very simple check-in tools that they can do as part of their coaching. You don't need to be a yoga teacher to do this, but I think coming
Mm,
from a place where I do have that, and I've yoga training as a yoga teacher will give you a lot more awareness and knowledge as to how we can specifically um, use the whole compass of yoga
mm,
um, with coaching. Um, but yeah, even I mean, I don't know if it's the same with you, but I've worked with clients who've never even been to a yoga class and they've just fallen in love with
Mm-hmm.
just, just the little bits that I'm offering them and they're integrating into their health plans.
Mm.
But oh my gosh, really love just sitting, just making myself sit for 10 minutes on a mat or on the floor on a cushion with no expectation, just me, and then just focusing on my breath for 10 minutes.
Mm.
And that's really hard to do, really
Mm.
hard.
It is. It is.
And yeah, I think that's powerful if you can meet that and if you can just tune in with yourself and what your body is telling you is going on. We can often switch off to those inner messages. But yeah, for sure, it's been a really powerful tool for me, my coaching.
Cool. And you mentioned that you've got your coaching's really busy and you homeschool all your four kids. How do you juggle that?
Good question, Elle. I'm always trying to work this one out. um, I don't do it on my own. I think that is one of the secrets to successful living is
Mm.
to value your community. And yeah, you will have this in just a matter of months yourself, but it's really important to have that support group around you. And we're really fortunate that we have a lot of home educating families. The children are in and out of the house at their activities, and you have to be quite structured, I suppose, with um, just organizing them a little bit. But it works. It takes more effort because we're the ones doing all of the organizing of what they're doing during the day. Um, but actually once you're in a bit of a flow state, it's really cool. There's like no expectations either, so the boys have found a rhythm to their everyday life which is really gentle and kind of works really nicely. I mean, we do a combination of like a wild forest school 2 days a week.
Mm.
um my 12-year-old has some online lessons, but they're mostly interactive in other home ed groups, lots and lots of play. Like my 8-year-old doesn't do any structured learning at all. He's just playing all day long.
Oh.
And I've got an 18 and a 16-year-old who are doing GCSEs and A levels currently, but it's just a stepping stone for them. We're not putting any pressure on them. We're not like madly obsessed with these exams. I think it's really important. This could be a separate conversation in itself, but it's really important to not put that much pressure on our children when it comes to
Mm.
achievement.
That's such a rare, amazing and rare approach because so many parents, I get the impression that they feel. I think maybe sometimes it's almost like what's the word, like misdirected pressure that one might put on themselves, they're putting it on their kids. Do you think that could be
Yeah,
something?
there's a lot of that. There's a
Yeah.
lot of that. I feel for our young people because they are growing up in a world that's very different to the one I grew up in. And I'm sure every generation says the same thing. I actually hear echoes of my own mother. Oh, it wasn't like that when I was young. But it's true. I feel like the world is radically different now. Everything is so screen based and the pressure, like just being visible constantly. And as a teenager, when you're trying to find your way in the world and you're a little bit awkward and you're just flirting with expressing yourself, you don't quite know who you are, you don't quite know what your voice sounds like. I've got boys, going through puberty, you don't know what your voice sounds like, lots of quirks and awkwardness as a person grows into themselves,
Mm.
becomes an adult, and it's just done so visibly. It's done like there's nowhere to go. You're just constantly seen, you're constantly heard. Your phones are always hearing you, the social media is always looking at you. There's an expectation to present yourself in a certain way.
Mm.
There's a certain expectation of how to speak and express yourself. Like my boys have a real fear of flirting with girls, for example, in case they get
Mm.
cancelled. It's a very confusing time for our young people. And I think as parents, what is, I have to check back in here and think, what is it that they need from me at this point? Because I'm also navigating this world. I'm also, finding a new way of being in this world, in this modern world.
Yeah.
But, but kind of wanting to be true to my values of, naturally raising a family, and how does that look like in this modern world? And I suppose you asked me about home educating earlier, and that was a real challenging time. We're like, okay, we're going to remove our kids from a mainstream system, but how are we going to keep them kind of still engaged with this new world and evolving at the same rate while still holding true to their those values? And I suppose it's a little bit like me in my early 20s and late teens. Those core values that I had at home, those foundations of, eating well, drinking enough water, sleeping enough, being with your family, really simple things like that were just like my foundations that I came back to. And I guess it's going to be the same for them. They'll come back to that as well.
Yeah. Because you speak something I love, you share a lot about frequency and kind of the energetic force field of nature and getting back to nature. And I'm always really inspired by how you stay,
Mm.
you integrate that. And at the same time, we have to live in the modern world as well. Could you tell me a little bit more about that and how you got into that?
Yeah, really happily. So I suppose, like, you and I can talk the same language when it comes to an energetic awareness of our bodies. We know that what's on the surface is not the full, in fact, it's not even the full picture. It's a tiny, tiny part of the whole picture. And I've always been very aware of my energy, my presence, my vibration. I'm aware of how my vibration changes when I'm in a different space. I'm really aware of other people's energy. um, I've read a huge amount on around this subject. um, I think what is really interesting with naturopathy as well is that our understandings of natural health and nature, that nature doesn't get it wrong. Nature wants us to heal and gives us everything in the natural world for us to do that healing. That's us, that is given to us, that's offered to us. But I also understand we've evolved over the last few generations to disconnect from that.
Mm,
So I am always seeking coming back into balance. I'm always seeking that homeostasis that we talk about in naturopathy.
mm,
And we get, and there's, everything has a frequency and everything has its own unique vibration. And I know you love your sounds and you love beauty, the beautiful that we chant in yoga absolutely has a frequency, and it's that frequency is met in the human body. In fact, it's met in all bodies. It's met in animals, it's met in the plant world, it's
mm,
met at the global frequency,
mm,
and it's a beautiful healing frequency, and it's one that nourishes us.
mm,
And we've done studies to show that there are frequencies for each body organ and for each mechanism of action in the body as well. So
mhm.
actually, we can go beyond the biochemical lens of looking at human health and actually go into bioelectrical health, which
Wow.
is something we haven't spoken about in the last 100 years, as the modern paradigm has swept in and made things very surfacey. But actually, if we go back to Hippocrates, if we go back to Ayurveda, if we go back to the I Ching, we were talking about energetics thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
And I love, love, love that. And I resonate really deeply with that. And that's something that I talk about a lot. And I'm talking about a lot more because I'm discovering that there are now technologies that can help us access these frequencies.
Wow.
It's helpful for us because we can't escape the modern world. You and I are doing this through a screen.
Right. Yeah,
There are electrical towers and 5G towers, and we live with Wi-Fi now. This non-native radiation is not a frequency that is natural to us.
mm,
And in fact, it's quite disruptive to us on a cellular level.
mm,
So for those of us who wants that combination of having access to all the conveniences that modern technology offers us, because it's not all bad. It does offer us scope for you and I to have this conversation and for us all to be connected in a positive way. However, to protect ourselves from those non-native radiation or frequencies that could be harming us, there is now technology that can actually transmute energy and put positive frequencies into our environment. So these are actually the same frequencies that you would get from stepping outside and grounding.
And like bare
Yeah,
feet.
and absolutely, or going to a gong bath, or having beautiful color frequencies in your house, or hugging someone, or listening to the sound of bird song. These are all beautiful natural frequencies.
Yeah.
And there's nothing magical or perhaps mystical in the sense that we don't fully understand it, but it's real and it's nature. It's just nature. That's all it is. But I feel that when we get more embodied, when we pay attention to how we feel, when we pay attention to our thoughts, those times when I've come back to my yoga mat and met myself fully, those are the times when I've been really, really aware of my energetic body and what's been resonating with me and what hasn't.
Yeah. Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, I mean, I think as you say, you and I speak the same language. Some people listening might not, that might sound, but it is, if you don't, if anyone listening is confused by this, just stepping outside, it's getting warmer now, bare feet in the grass for a few minutes, even listening to birdsong, looking at the sunrise, sounds almost too simple, but it just like decelerates you from all the screen time, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's the antidote.
The antidote, yeah.
It's actually the antidote, yeah.
And Izzy, what are your do you have any kind of daily or just really regular non-negotiables that you can share?
Mm,
Or
I do.
yeah.
I
Oh.
like that you call them non-negotiables as well, because they are. And I guess you're the same. Have you had conversations with people when everything's going really, really well in their life and they're talking about how gorgeous their self-care routine is, and it's like, I'm doing everything so well right now. I'm having my Epsom salt bath, I'm having my green smoothie, and then you'll find that something trips them up, and the first thing to go is that they're not doing their beautiful daily practices.
Yeah.
And calling it a non-negotiable is so powerful, because it shouldn't just be something that you offer yourself something as a treat or when things are going well. It should be literally how you choose, like if this is your language, how you choose to medicate yourself.
Mm.
Think of someone who has a really chronic health condition. They will not miss that pill. They will take that religiously every single day at the time that the doctor says to take it,
Mm.
because they know without it, their health will plummet.
Yeah.
Well, these non-negotiables really should be exactly met in the same energetic way as that pill, I believe.
Mhm.
But for me, my non-negotiables are very simple things now. Lemon water first thing in the morning, hot lemon water first thing before anything. And then, like you just said, go outside, see those first rays of sun. We don't get a lot of sun here in the UK, particularly at the moment, but when we can, I'm facing the sun. I'm rolling up my sleeves, rolling up my trouser legs, expose my belly, trying to expose as much skin as possible to that early morning sun. And that doesn't just feel good, but we're receiving the light codes. We're really receiving the frequency of light, which is really important for lots and lots of things, as you and I both know, hormones, melatonin, serotonin, all of that, everything. It also lowers inflammation markers. We're doing more and more research as to what that frequency of light is doing to our cells. It's really, really powerful. So, and then what else would be my non-negotiable? So morning, yeah, and then just grounding. So trying to find some bit of natural surface, and putting my feet in the earth, putting my feet, obviously if I'm traveling, then I'm out first thing, which is amazing. And I want to speak to this a little bit, because here in the UK, it doesn't always feel very appealing to do this, does it? Especially just think it's like a January early January morning and it's grey and drizzly, and the last thing you want to do is get up.
Yeah.
And it's more than just sunlight, it's just being out in the light, being out in the morning lights.
Yes.
I think that's what's powerful. That is what we need. Um, and it doesn't have to be for very long, just a minute or two if you can bear it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that is definitely one of my big non-negotiables. But actually, really, like every day, I want to get out and walk with my kids and my dog. We go to our local woods and then just have a little walk, and
That's
that's the simple non-negotiable.
nice.
But it's also like a pleasure of mine. Um, and if I don't do those things, I mean, I do them religiously now, but the times when I haven't done them, I've just not felt great. The day's not got off to a good start.
Mhm.
So
It's so
yeah, they are
true.
important.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, you can some I think a lot of people can sometimes just write off a bad day as a bad day and maybe don't know why it was. And of course, sometimes things are way beyond our control, of course, but I do agree with you. It's those little things that you put in place. As you say, if you were taking a medication that was life-saving, you wouldn't even question it. Whereas it's a little bit of discipline, I suppose, to
Mm.
do those little things. And is there anything else you kind of observe? Like I remember in the past you've talked about low toxic, non-toxic kind of products in the household. So not just the food we eat, but just what's in your environment. Could you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's important for me because, and I suppose this speaks into a little bit what we were discussing just a few minutes ago about how we are living in a more toxic world.
Mm,
We have, I mean, a big thing for me is I'm 46. I'm fully in my perimenopause.
mhm,
I do not take HRT, and I have no intention of taking HRT. I have zero judgment of any woman who chooses to take HRT, but I feel for me that's something I don't want. Um, and however, I'm really aware of endocrine disruptors in our environments. And there are measures that I take now to really ensure that we have as less exposure to that as possible.
mm.
So yeah, so a few years ago I got rid of all the plastic tubs. My husband was thrilled. He was like, "Oh my gosh, are you literally getting rid of everything? Like everything non-stick, plastic, all the pans, like scratched. I mean, I've never had scratched Teflon pans, but anything that was remotely non-stick. I'm really careful with the furniture that we have. Um, Anything plastic, I put in the garden and I off gas for a day. Plastic wrapping around food, that's really easy to just rip off, or first of all, try and not buy the food in plastic,
Yeah.
but rip off the plastic when you get home, and I clean and ionize all my fruit and veg. Um, I mean, and organic grass-fed, pastured
Mhm.
animal products and organic and seasonal veggies. It might sound really intense, but it's actually coming back to a really simple way of living.
How our grandparents would have been, probably.
Yeah. And cooking everything from scratch. I do a lot of fermenting. My son is an aspiring baker. He makes all our sourdough bread.
Oh, amazing.
Um, uh, yeah, I'm quite aware of that, and I'm also really aware I've got four boys and hormones. They're growing boys, and they are exposed. They're going to be exposed to a lot more endocrine disruptors than we were.
Of course.
Um,
What are the biggest culprits of endocrine disruptors, just in case anyone listening is not quite familiar with?
what are the biggest ones? I
Yeah.
think you need, particularly for women, we need to look at the products that we're putting on our skin. So look at your skincare. That's a really big one. Your skin is your biggest organ,
Mm-hmm.
and any toxins going on your skin, your liver's going to be battling with trying to process and eliminate. So try as much as possible to really look at what you're putting on your skin. Shampoo, conditioner, shower gel included. I know we just wash it off, but when you're in a hot shower and your pores are open, It's
Mm.
going into your bloodstream.
Mhm.
Plastics is massive. BPA is huge. You know, there are lots of long technical sciencey terms. If you're buying a product, basically look at the label. And if you can't pronounce what's on that label, and if you ever think, would I eat this?
Mm.
And the answer is no, then put it back on the shelf
Yeah.
because we have this real disassociation, don't we? That if we don't understand it and yet it's on a shelf in a supermarket, it must be safe. It must be
Mm.
okay.
Hmm.
There's a real dissonance with having that sort of autonomy, that health autonomy that we can make those choices for ourselves.
Yeah.
And another tip would be if you are buying packaged foods, is like the shorter the ingredient list, the better. The ones that have these great long lists of weird Frankenstein type ingredients with numbers and letters at the end of them. And it's shocking that they're all marketed at children as well. A lot of this junk food stuff is marketed at children and advertises at children. But they're a big one for me. They're a big no-no. Um, yeah.
And it's frustrating because I think the alternative to buying all that stuff is almost seen as inconvenient when actually, as you said before, it how this low toxic, non-toxic way of living just goes back to actually it reflects a much simpler time anyway.
Mm.
And actually, people are probably, and they also, yeah, yeah. I
What do you
usually
what do you out of interest, what do you do? Do you use tallow and things like that on your skin? Have you
I
discovered those?
I take my makeup off with I'm one of those people who I only want to use one cleanser, makeup to naked skin. I can't do like multiple. So I was using a really nice cleanser and then I actually realized that I love using coconut oil. So I just take
Mm.
it off. I take my makeup off with coconut oil. I switched the one I recently switched, especially when I got pregnant, was I switched from any SPF stuff to mineral SPF or mineral sunscreen just because I
Zinc oxide. Yeah.
heard that was much better. And yeah, it seems to protect my skin the same way. So that's a nice one. Um, Cleaning products. That's something we actually have to do as a homework piece for CNM anyway. So so that was great. And yeah, like you said, just reading labels. But and yeah, my shampoo and conditioner are very, I mean, I use Zavida. I think they're pretty good. They
Mm.
smell very natural. But yes, I think I've done it gradually. I don't think you have to like listen to this, throw away all your products and buy all the new ones. I think it's just like a gradual switch
Mm.
up can be, and it's second nature to me now to go for these things instead of and deodorant, that's a massive one. I use natural
Yeah. I've
and it
been
does work. I'm a
It
yoga teacher. I get very
does.
sweaty. It does work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have like sweaty teenage boys and sweaty adult man husband. It
Yeah.
does work. I make my own deodorant just with bicarb and
Yeah.
um arrowroot
Mm.
starch and coconut oil, and then maybe a drop or two of essential oils. And they are really effective. And for us girls, we need to be really careful about putting products on our underarms that are so close to all this lymphatic tissue. But yeah, great point about cleaning products. Again, it's so simple. I did both of my ovens last weekend and they were really bad, really bad. And I just, sprinkled on my bicarb with a bit of water, sprayed it down with some white vinegar, left it overnight, and the following day just wiped the whole lot
Does it?
clean.
Yeah. Does it?
So
Works.
easy, so easy. So yeah, it is definitely it's the everything. I mean, perhaps this feels like a bit of a movement for us. Maybe this sounds radical, but what we have to remember is that this is simply remembering. We're just coming back to a time when we were less toxic, but we were also living much simpler lives.
Yeah. Less busy, so we did have more time as well to,
Mhm.
yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
I usually ask Izzy at this point, but we might have already covered it. If there was anything, and maybe we haven't actually. If there's anything that is in the wider wellness world that is sort of portrayed as wellness, but actually is probably more does more harm than good? Is there anything you can think of?
Quite a few. I
Okay.
think hopefully we've moved beyond the diet culture.
Yes.
Hopefully we are now no longer demonizing fats.
Yeah.
Um, those were really big ones for me. And like I said, I was a young person. I was a millennium young person,
Mm.
and the women were skinny then, really skinny.
Mm.
It was kind of at the start of all that body shaming with Heat. Do you remember Heat magazine
Oh,
when they would
I
do this
used to buy
awful,
it and it was awful. It was awful.
just awful? And I reference this all the time, but I remember this one scene during like a Friday night chat show with Chris Evans, and he publicly weighed Victoria Beckham
Oh,
after she had her first baby
oh,
and
good.
said, "Are you back down to your pre-birth weight?" And he put her on the scales. I mean, she was like this, right?
Yeah.
He put her on the scales, and everyone gave like a big round of applause because she was like 6 stone 8 or something stupid.
Yeah.
And that was just like, is no one it is I was like, can no one see this? Is this not really damaging to us women?
Yes.
What is going on? So thankfully that has passed now. But there is one more recent wellness thing that was a real trend. It's still a big trend now, actually, but it's never been for me, and for it's probably not for most of my peers. As a mid-40s woman who's got a real vata constitution, borderline aggravation,
Mm.
cold water therapy,
Ah,
not for us.
interesting. That's so
It's
interesting.
not for us. I get the contrast. I will happily go into like a tepid to slightly cooler shower, which is quite
Mm.
nice for circulation. But plunging into ice for a minute,
Not for everyone, is
not
it?
for everyone. And I think we need to remind ourselves to use our discernment when we listen to health experts
Mm.
as to things like this, top tips to, I don't know, some people swear. My husband has one. We've got one on our deck,
Mm.
and my kids love it, but they're all little pitter types.
Mm.
They have a lot of fire that they need cooling down. But
These are the Ayurvedic doshas, if anyone's wondering
Ayurvedic
what we're
versions,
talking
yes.
about. The but you're right. It's the constitution of your body, and you said vata, so you're going to be more you're
Cold, dry.
yeah,
Yeah. So I need warmth. I need oil. I
yeah.
need slowing down. I need grounding things. Vata types are quite flighty. They're very dry, quite dry, quite very cold. These cold fingertips. It
Mm.
just doesn't. It just doesn't do constitutional types like myself any favors at all. So I'm just putting that out there.
No,
Don't
I'm
don't hate.
honest. No, not at all. I think I'm so glad you said that because I do think some of these, especially more, because it is, even if it's got a lot of health benefits, getting into ice water it's extreme. And I think when it's sold as a cure all for everyone, it is, you got to, as you say, you've got to question it. I'm so glad you said that because people just kind of take it and suddenly everyone was having ice bath. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah. Just always see if it's right for you.
Yeah.
As with anything, as with food, as with the way you move your body. I think there's a real danger in that sort of dogmatic approach that this is just the way we're going to do things now. And a huge part of my journey has been, again, coming back to the truth of who I am and what works for me. And oftentimes it's been very different to everyone else.
Oh,
Um, but it's been right for me, and I can't do any different than that.
that's brilliant. I always like to ask, Izzy, just as a final little thing, if there's anything that you do, it's that's not an obviously wellness practice, but something you just would like to share, that just makes you feel really, really good. That is like like a non-obvious wellness tip.
I've got a couple actually. I think laughter. is just the best medicine. You
Brilliant.
instantly change the energy when you laugh with somebody. Instantly. It's so good for you. It's so bonding. It instantly heals an argument. It creates a bond between your kids and yourself and
Mm.
friends. It raises the vibe. Um, it gets you back into the frequency of the other people in the room.
Mm.
That is like an instant. But one of my most favorite things of all, and something everyone needs to do, is the 17-second hug.
Oh, okay.
You heard about this?
Oh my God, no.
So
7.
after 17 seconds, your hearts begin to beat together. So you're actually getting into resonance of that person.
Oh, I love that.
So you are sharing an energetic space. And we have a tendency to quick hugs and then we're off. And
Yeah.
it's really helped me to slow down when I'm hugging my kids, when I'm hugging my family and my friends. I'm like, right, 17 seconds.
Oh, I love
Seconds is a long time, actually. You kind of feel like they go, right, they're starting to pull away. It's getting a
that.
bit uncomfortable.
Oh, that's a great one. That is a really good tip. Everyone go give someone a hug for
Try
17
it.
or a
Yeah.
tree. If there's not a person. All right. Well, thank you so much, Izzy. This has been such a lovely conversation. And thank you for sharing all your incredible knowledge with us.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for asking me, Elle.